Welcome everyone to our session today on teaching information literacy, exploring the potential of the Teach the Teachers model. I am so excited to have you all here with me today to talk about this topic that's really important to me. It's been the focus of my work and my research for the past few years. So I'm always excited when I have a chance to talk about this topic. So for folks that don't know me, my name is Jane Hammonds. I am an associate professor in the university libraries at Ohio State. I'm the teaching and learning engagement librarian. And you can contact me at hammonds.73@osu.edu. And I'm always happy to talk more with you about our topic today. So as some folks know, has been to one of the other presentations this summer. This presentation is part of a continuing series originating with a panel discussion I organized back in April on celebrating 50 years of information literacy since the term was coined in 1974. That got such good attendance and interest. I ended up organizing several different panels and discussions and presentations to follow up on that. So I wanted to make sure that folks have access to those. If you did not have a chance to see those presentations, I'll put the links there to everyone in the chat. So you access those slides and you should be able to access those videos. I will say really quickly, I haven't had a chance to get all of them up on YouTube yet. So 3 of them are up on YouTube and captioned and everything. 2 of them are direct links to a folder that still has it. So I'm still working on getting the other 2 up, other ones up on YouTube, and I'll try to get those up as soon as I can. But I wanted to make sure that everyone did have access to those if you missed any of those videos. Some quick participation guidelines. We do have a fairly big audience today. We have about 228 people here. So just to make sure that we're all on the same page, participation is encouraged, but it is in no way required. If you are in that weary or frazzled stage and you just want to sit and listen, that is totally fine. We'll have a poll, we'll have chat, Q&A, so different options to participate if you would like to do so. Any general comments that you have, please go ahead and add those in the chat if you want to share with your fellow participants there. If you do have specific questions that you would like me to answer, it will help if you can put those in the Q&A. Since I'm the only one moderating this, I don't want to miss questions that come through the chat. So if you put those questions in the Q&A, I'll be sure to be able to see those easily. And I'll ask folks not to use the raised hand feature now, just because we do have such a large audience. But I do hope that everyone will have a chance to participate if you would like. So I did create a Padlet for the session today, and I shared a bunch of resources on there already. And I think a few other folks have added some additional resources. But please feel free to go ahead and go to that Padlet if you have other resources that are relevant to the topic today. Go ahead and add those, and that will remain available as long as possible as a resource for folks that are interested in this topic. Right. So what we're going to do today, we're going to talk about what we mean when we talk about the Teach the Teachers or faculty-focused approach to information literacy. We're going to look at sort of the benefits and the concerns about this approach and try to provide some quick sort of next steps or guidance for if you want to get started or you want to expand the faculty development programming that you are offering. So I wanted to mention this concept has been described using a number of different terms: faculty-led information literacy, train the trainers, teach the teachers. I tend to have been moving toward using faculty-focused information literacy. I personally tend to try to avoid train the trainers. I don't really like the connotations that come with that. First of all, it just sounds a little bit corporate for me. And I think it kind of, for me, gives the impression of kind of limiting what we're doing, that we're just trainers who are like training the faculty members to use the library. And I don't conceive of this model or think of this model in this way. So I tend to use either Teach the Teachers or faculty-focused information literacy. But of course, you are welcome to use the term that most resonates with you as, and how you are thinking about how this concept works. Also want to mention really quickly that when we talk about faculty development, faculty focus, that we want to make it clear that we are not talking about only tenured or tenure track faculty here. These are not the only ones that can participate in this programming. For the purposes of this discussion, when I talk about faculty, I have the very broadest conception possible, basically. So that can include tenured and tenure track faculty, instructors, lecturers, adjunct faculty, graduate teaching assistants, and then those that are instructional designers, educational technologists, other kinds of teaching support professionals that may not be directly teaching the class themselves, but are designing the classes or are supporting the instructors to design and teach their classes. In the programming that we offer, we have all of these ranges of participants and librarians as well who participate in our programming. So think of faculty as the broadest term possible. At least that's the way I conceive of it. So I have a quick poll just to get an idea of the kinds of work that you may have been doing with faculty at your own libraries. So I wanted to get an idea of whether you've offered any workshops, any like faculty learning communities, courses, course redesign programs, if you provide teaching resources or any of those. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll really quickly. And hopefully everyone should now be seeing that poll. Nope, I forgot to launch. There we go. All right, now hopefully everyone should be seeing that poll. So if you feel comfortable responding, please go ahead and do so. All right, so almost up to about 75%. So we'll give it just a few more seconds. And then we'll go ahead and end that poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. In that poll, share the results. So hopefully everyone is seeing the results there. So you can see that good percentages of us, more than half of us, slightly more than half of us, are offering teaching resources that faculty can use to teach information literacy. We have a good percentage as well, about 34% that are offering or have offered information literacy workshops for faculty. But then smaller percentages who have developed, for example, a course for faculty, who have offered information literacy focused faculty learning communities or communities of practice, or done like course redesign programs for faculty. And about 35% who say that we're not really doing much faculty development programming at all. So thank you all so much for sharing your results there. And we'll go ahead and jump in. Go ahead and put those slides and everything in there one more time before we jump in. So I wanted to give a really brief overview of faculty development as a concept. This is only like 2 slides. I know that many of you are familiar with faculty development as a concept, but just in case there are folks who are a little bit less familiar with faculty development in general, thought it might be helpful to give just a really brief overview. So basically, faculty development is a range of different types of activities that are intended to enhance the skills or the knowledge or the values or the attitudes of faculty members. And again, remember, we're thinking like very broadly here. In areas such as teaching, research, even some will focus on more personal, like things like wellness, those kinds of areas. So of course, when we're talking about faculty-focused information literacy, we're primarily focusing on faculty members as teachers, in their capacity as teachers. So I'm not really talking about supporting faculty members as researchers when I'm talking about this. But so wide range of programming that can, consist of faculty development. Faculty development, some institutions, have the Center for Teaching and Learning that handles faculty development. Some have committees that are responsible for faculty development. Some just have an individual who does faculty development. So it can look very different depending on the institution. But its general is this programming or resources that are provided to help faculty members develop their knowledge and skills and attitudes and values in different areas. I wanted to highlight that faculty development is referred to by many different kinds of terms. You might hear educational development, academic development, instructor development. They're sometimes used interchangeably, although some educational developers, faculty developers have been moving more toward using the term educational development. The POD network, which is the major organization for developers in North America, they use the term educational development. It's not faculty development. But we're going to use faculty development today, but just it is important to recognize that folks do use other terms when they're talking about faculty development. Some of the different forms of faculty development, part of this can be just individual consultations with a faculty member, but there might be faculty learning communities, communities of practice, all types of workshops from standalone workshops to multi-session workshops or institutes, various types of courses, modules, orientation programs, faculty fellow programs, conferences, all of those can count as faculty development. So it really is a wide range of programming that is consisted of faculty development. All right, so that's a really, really quick overview of faculty development as a concept. Now I want to jump in a little bit more and talk specifically about faculty-focused information literacy and how I conceive of this and how others have talked about this. So these are some quotes from an ACRL conference paper that Risa, and I apologize if I mispronounced that, Risa Smith published in 1997 as an ACRL conference paper called Philosophical Shift, Teach the Faculty to Teach Information Literacy. And so a couple of quotes here. So the time has come to shift our focus from the students to the faculty, to teach the faculty to teach information literacy. Smith argues that information literacy will be integrated into the curriculum only if librarians commit their time primarily to faculty development and collaboration. So I wanted to highlight that word primarily there. We know from the examples that you've seen that librarians are already doing faculty development in some ways, but I think that word primarily is really important there. And then this argument that teaching the students ourselves is usually not appropriate assistance if our goal is the integration of information literacy in the curriculum. Smith actually states in the article, we need to discourage faculty from expecting us to teach students themselves. So I would love to hear what your response is to those quotes. So we'll do like a chat waterfall if folks have done that before. If you feel comfortable, don't push respond yet, but think about 1 to 3 words that you would like to share that represent your reactions to those statements, and go ahead and put those in the chat. I'll give folks a few seconds to write their 1 to 3 words if you would like to do so. And then when we say go, we'll go ahead and post them all. So we'll give it a few seconds for folks to see. Responses are already coming in. You guys are moving really fast. All right. So if you haven't posted your response yet, go ahead and post your response in there. And we will see what folks say. So we have some different ones. So we have interested, unsure, diminishing, groundbreaking, intrigued, collaboration, too few resources, too much time, new way of thinking, if only, yes and no, skeptical, smart but incomplete, interesting, practical, false dichotomy, makes total sense, overwhelming, collaboration, surprised, conflicted, scary, agree for integration, working on it, interested, hesitant, practical, hard sell, feasible, overwhelming but support, all of this, ambitious, yes to collaboration, faculty not interested, students are priority, challenging experts' authority, undermine student-centeredness, hopeful, practical, wow, excited, unsure. So we are getting like a huge range of responses here. So this is really great. Some people are really excited about it, like, oh yes, let's do it. Other folks are very skeptical about it, right? say undermines librarians, maybe undermines the student focus, right? To all or nothing. Yeah, so thanks. Yeah, these are great responses, and these are totally, totally. So yeah, the question is on the screen right now. 1 to 3 words that represent your reaction to those statements. So that's what we were. Sorry, we went too fast. Yeah, folks started responding so fast. It kind of went before we were like actually ready to get started, which is great because folks are really excited. But yeah, lots of responses coming in. So wonderful. Yeah, so we'll talk about, and some of these concerns that folks have raised with their comments in there, I'm going to be trying to address some of those. I may not be able to get to all of them, but one of the things that I want to mention, just a couple of folks that respond to this about it takes away from the student focus. And I want to say, for me, the way I conceive of this model is that the student is always the primary focus, but it's thinking about what is the best way that we can help students? What is the best way that we can use the limited time and resources that we have to help students? So that's the way that I think about this, and hopefully that will come through as we're talking about it more. But we'll jump in and try to get to as many of those concerns as possible. The way that I conceive of this approach is that this is a model in which librarians are going to spend a significant amount of time on faculty development. It doesn't necessarily mean every librarian that does instruction at your organization or every librarian in your institution, right? But some librarians are going to be spending a significant amount of time developing or implementing faculty development initiatives that are intended to teach faculty to teach information literacy. And we talked about librarians are already doing faculty development, right, in different ways. Many libraries, not all, but many libraries, I should say, more broadly. How I see this as different is it's the shift in priorities, right? That it's shifting the focus of we need to be providing all of the instruction to students, to putting instruction to faculty at the center of, or at least much closer to the center of our efforts to teach information literacy than it is now. We'll talk a little bit later on about what this means to instruction to students in my perspective, but for me, it does represent a shift in priority that we're going to make faculty development much more important part of our efforts to teach information literacy than it often has been. Right, so really quickly on what this is not. So I know that there's tons out there about individual faculty librarian collaborations. And although that could be part of this is beyond just thinking about individual faculty librarian collaboration level. This is not, in my perspective, an attempt to increase the amount of instruction provided by librarians. So sometimes libraries will do a workshop, and like, if we can do a workshop for faculty, then they'll be more willing to let us into their classrooms. And that's not necessarily the way that I think about this. This is really about transferring a lot of the teaching of information literacy into the hands of the faculty members themselves or the instructors themselves, rather than we're going to try to do this as a way to increase the amount of librarian direct instruction to students. I don't think of this as training faculty how to use library resources. In the work that I do with faculty, and this is just my personal sort of approach, very little of it is actually talking about using library resources. We talk a little bit about that, but it's not the main focus of what we talk about. And this is not sort of like we're going to do a workshop, every couple of years for faculty. Right, so I'm talking about something that's more sustained than that. But this is also not, we're going to do some faculty development program and then we're going to completely step away, right? And we're going to hand it over and we're done with information literacy. That's not what we're talking about. That's not what I'm talking about. So that's sort of what this is not for me. For me, what this is librarians providing sustained, ongoing faculty development programming that is focused on teaching faculty to teach information literacy. Part of this could be librarians acting as peer consultants to faculty to redesign their courses or their programs to integrate information literacy into the curriculum. This is librarians developing resources that will allow faculty to teach information literacy or support faculty to teach information literacy on their own. This is faculty development acknowledged in the mission of the library or in the mission of the instruction department or whoever, whatever organization does instruction in your library as a priority for integrating information literacy into the curriculum. And libraries potentially, having positions dedicated to providing information literacy focused faculty development. So that's the way that I have envisioned this model. It may not align with how everyone else has talked about this model or the way that you think about this model, but I just wanted to share that this is sort of my perspective on what I think this model would look like. So just a quick, so some of the things I wanted to give an example of what we do or what, in Ohio State. So some of the things that we offer, I designed to facilitate a 6-module Carmen Canvas course called Teaching Information Literacy that any instructor in the university can sign up and complete. I offer regularly teaching information literacy workshops, normally 6 to 8 workshops a semester for faculty. We offer a second program that is called Meaningful Inquiry. This is a 5-part workshop that we offer that is both in person and online, depending on the time of year for instructors. And then we also have our instructor resources at University Library site that has videos, activities, modules that instructors can use to teach information literacy incorporated into their courses. So I wanted to give just a quick overview of sort of this is the kind of programming that we offer. Your program or everyone else's program is not going to necessarily look the same. It's going to look different in every context, but this is just an example of what our program looks like. All right, so I'll pause there to see if there are any questions. And again, it would be great, since there are so many comments, if you do have specific questions, if you could add those to the Q&A, they'll be a little bit more visible for me, but I can go take a look and see. So a question in the chat, can you share your Canvas course on teaching information literacy? Yeah, if you send me an email, I will definitely be able to give you a link that will allow you to access most of the course. Because it is in Canvas, you wouldn't be able to see like anything they have to submit an assignment for, but you would be able to see all of the general pages. So if you email me at hammonds.osu.edu. Let's see. So a couple questions in the Q&A here. How many participants do you get for the workshops? So that's a really great question. In terms of, in the last couple of years, I've been opening them up to non-Ohio State participants. So it's a little bit more challenging. But in terms of Ohio State participants, I would say it really depends on the topic, but anywhere between 25 and 75 participants. Now, these are hour-long workshops for those workshops of Ohio State participants. For other things like the Meaningful Inquiry workshop that we offer, that's like a 5-module multi-day workshop. We generally get between 12 to 15 participants each time we offer that workshop. So it kind of depends, like the level of programming. The hour-long workshops, of course, are a much, and those are all virtual, so they're a much smaller commitment for the faculty. So I tend to get a wider audience for those than we do for the more multi-day ones, of course. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so we'll talk, how do you know if faculty are applying what they learn? That is a challenge, absolutely have to acknowledge. I'm working on one of my goals in the next year or so is going to be to do a research study of faculty that have participated in the programming to see how they are applying what they learn. I do have some anecdotal evidence. Faculty who have to participate in or who complete the teaching information literacy course, they have to do an information literacy action plan as their final project for the course. And so I'm able to see that project and see the plans that they have. But yes, I do admit that assessing how faculty are implementing is definitely a challenge. Absolutely. So what are the incentives for instructors to engage with this instruction? So we're going to talk more about incentives in general a little bit later on. But for like the 1 hour workshops that I offer, there's not really any major incentive that they get. It's just if they're interested in the topic, you know. For the teaching information literacy course, participants can earn what we call at Ohio State and a teaching endorsement, which is offered through our Institute for Teaching and Learning. So basically they get like institutional credit for completing that course. The same for the meaningful inquiry workshop as well. They can also earn an endorsement for that. And so that goes on their tenure and promotion documentation, that goes with their graduate students. It actually goes on their like record, so that they do get acknowledgement and credit for having done that. So we've got a lot of questions coming in. So I'm gonna jump ahead. We're like already halfway through the hour, but I'm gonna go ahead and we'll try to get back to as many questions as we can going forward. But I do wanna try to hit some of the questions and concerns that folks have had and that we've seen in the comments about this model. So some of the reasons why folks have argued in support of this model. So really quickly, sustainability and scalability is one of those reasons, right? There's no way that we can reach all of the students as librarians that need information literacy instruction, right? It's just not possible, right? And we keep often trying to add more and more instruction that we can provide. If you were at the panel last week, Maddie Johnson was talking about 1 shots becoming 2 shots, becoming 3 shots, right? And it just adds all of this additional library labor, and there's still no way that we can reach all of the students. But each instructor that we work with, they maybe are teaching 4 or 5 classes a semester, and they're having 20 to 30 or 50 or 100 students in those classes, right? And so if they are revising their courses to integrated information literacy, they are going to be able to expand the number of students that we can reach without us having to be the ones providing all of the instruction. Increased integration of information literacy into the course, right? We know, and this isn't always the case, but sometimes when students come into the library for like a 1-shot session, they don't really see the point of it, or they don't see how it's connected to what they're learning, right? Whereas if the instructor is doing the one that is doing the information literacy instruction, it's integrated into the course. They see it as part of learning the content of the course, part of the process of the course, and not as something that's just like an add-on. The faculty role in the classroom, right? The faculty are the ones that control students' grades. They have the relationship with the student. Students are likely going to take this more seriously. And this is not intended at all to be like an insult to librarians who are great teachers and put a ton of effort into their instruction. But we all know how hard it can be to get students to take an information literacy session seriously. But if their instructors are the ones doing the instruction and they know it's part of their grade, right? Maybe they're going to pay a little bit more attention. We know that it's important to think about information literacy in the context of a discipline. Information literacy doesn't look exactly the same in every discipline. So the instructors are the ones who are recognizing what it means to be information literate in that particular discipline, right? And then just generally thinking about information literacy as a concept, it's just, as we mentioned, it's like too big. It's too big for for librarians to be able to teach this on our own, right? We have to have the faculty involved. You know, we spend a lot of time doing instruction directly to students. And some folks have argued, Melissa Bowles-Terry and Carrie Donovan, right, that this is preventing librarians from being able to work at a higher level within the curriculum, right? From limiting us because we're spending all of our time trying to do more and more instruction with students. We're not able to be involved in these campus-wide or program-wide initiatives, right? So that's another argument that folks have made in support of this model. Another argument that, you know, this is a way that librarians are embracing their expertise, and librarians are being viewed as peers and experts rather than as service providers, as helpers, as Nicole Pogowski said, right? Sometimes, unfortunately, as babysitters, right? And so for me, I feel, I know someone had mentioned in the chat, like this is like taking away from librarians' expertise. I think that this is librarians embracing their expertise, right? And saying that we have something that's really important that you as instructors need to know about, and that's going to make you a better instructor, right? So I don't at all see this as librarians giving up their expertise, right? And again, that's my perspective. Not everyone may agree there, but I think we have to change the way that we think of ourselves as educators. And this is part of this, doing that. All right. And one thing I want to highlight really quickly, there's some folks have done research on distinctions between faculty and librarian culture. Librarian culture tends to value collaboration. We get upset when faculty they don't want us in their class, but faculty culture tends to value autonomy, right? And they may see our efforts, as well-meaning as our efforts are, as intrusive, right? They are the ones in control of their class, and they don't want to give up class time to a librarian as a teacher. Right. And, there's some research out there showing that when faculty do teach information literacy, they often say, I do it myself. I want to do it myself. Right. So I think that part of this is also accepting and recognizing that there is this distinction in faculty librarian culture that we see. All right. But, right. And we saw this in the comments that were coming in when we talked about this. For a lot of folks, this is a really radical idea. And it runs counter, right, as Cowan and Eva have said, to what we've learned and what we've been trying to do. And I want to acknowledge, right, I know that librarians have spent tons and tons of time and effort building their student-focused information literacy programs, right, have spent years trying to get into the classroom as much as possible and have put a ton of effort into doing so. And now I'm coming along and saying we should change that model. And so I recognize that for a lot of folks, this is a radical idea, right? And Cowan and Even are not the only ones who have used the term radical to talk about this approach. But it does, it does represent a significant change for a lot of us in thinking about how we go about teaching information literacy. And I want to acknowledge those concerns, right? Information literacy is librarians' thing, right? This is what gives us, not totally, but right, this is what gives us a lot of our legitimacy in saying that we have an educational role, right? It's because we are the experts in information literacy. We are teaching students information literacy, right? And that is what gives us, our educational role, our purpose in this institution where we're no longer gatekeepers to information, right? And so it's really hard to think about, oh my God, do we have to let this go? Right. Bowles, Terry, and Donovan again, right? They really highlighted that it's going to be so hard to make this shift because librarians are the ones that have worked so hard to do this and create information literacy and to bring it to the prominence that it does have. And now we're saying we should, sort of give it over to faculty. And so it's definitely really challenging and concerning to a lot of librarians. And I want to acknowledge and recognize that. The instruction that we do directly to students is often the way that we provide and demonstrate our value, right? We've done all these sessions for these students. This is how we show the administration that we are a valuable part of the organization, right? And then some of the concerns that I'm going to talk more about this one in a second, but right, there's faculty aren't going to participate. They don't want to do this. They're not interested. They won't, be involved in our programming. And that's an important concern as well. I'm going to talk more about that one, right? And I also want to acknowledge that librarians and faculty don't always have the best relationships. There's been a lot of tension, right, about, librarians not being seen as equal to faculty, concerns that they won't accept us. Some research out there talking about librarians have had struggles sort of really embracing a teacher identity. Not everyone, but, some librarians it has been a challenge to kind of really think of themselves as teachers in the same way as disciplinary faculty. Some evidence out there that librarians sometimes tended to display deference behavior toward faculty. So we have complicated relationships with faculty in the disciplines, and that could raise a lot of concerns for librarians about whether this model is going to be something that could possibly work. All right, so I was going to have a question here, but in the sake of time, we'll try to move to the questions at the end. But because I definitely want to have time to get to questions, and hopefully some of what I'm going to talk about here might address some of the questions that folks have. So here are some questions that I have. First, I think it's important to ask the question: is faculty development actually effective? Does it work? Right? And there is limited evidence now that a faculty-focused approach is going to result in increased student information literacy because just not enough libraries and librarians have been doing sustained faculty development for a long time. As we mentioned at the beginning, right, the assessment piece is still a challenge. So no, I can't say right at this moment that there's a guarantee that this is going to result in increased student information literacy because we've shown it through research, right? But I can say that there is research out there that's saying faculty development in general does work, right? Faculty development does produce changes in teaching practices, and faculty development, those changes in teaching practices do support improved student performance. Right. So although I can't specifically say this related to information literacy itself, there's just not enough research. There's just not enough libraries that have been doing sustained long-term faculty development programming to be able to show this. But faculty development itself, there is evidence to show that it does work. Will faculty teach information literacy? Like, will they come? Will they want to do this? Right. We know that there's lots of research out there that faculty say that they value information literacy. But if we ask them if they actually teach it, they say, oh, not really, right? But I think that there's some nuance to some of these findings, right? So a lot of this has been like faculty don't teach information literacy because they won't invite librarians into their class to teach information literacy. But I don't think that necessarily means that faculty aren't teaching information literacy. I think that there is research out there that faculty generally often are already teaching the skills and concepts associated with information literacy. They may not be using the term information literacy, as Bill Badke mentioned last week, right? They don't know what that term means. But if you talk to them about, do you want your students to learn this? Do you teach your students this? All of these information literacy skills and concepts, they say that they are, or that they want to, right? They may not know how to do it very well, but they think it's important to teach them those skills and those concepts. Some studies have looked at different concepts, either with the standards or with the framework, and asked faculty to say, whose responsibility is it to teach this? In many cases, they say it's the faculty responsibility to teach these things, right? So I think that just because faculty members aren't always willing to invite a librarian into the classroom does not necessarily mean that they aren't interested in teaching information literacy or that they don't already think that they are teaching information literacy. Maybe they need to know how to do it better, and that's where we can help them, right? But I don't necessarily think that, not inviting a librarian into the classroom means, we don't care about information literacy. Will faculty teach information literacy well, right? We've all seen really terrible research assignments, right? And so some librarians might be, hey, like if we give this over into the hands of faculty, they're not going to do a good job, right? And my argument to that is if they are participating in our programming, if they have a better understanding of information literacy, right? If they have the skills and the strategies to be able to integrate information literacy into their classes, we're going to see fewer of those really bad research assignments, right? Although I do think, this model does mean that librarians are going to have to give up some control, right? And let faculty have some autonomy in how they integrate information literacy into their classrooms. But that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get a bunch of really terrible, faculty designed research assignments out of it. I think there's chances that we'll get much better assignments. Do we have to stop teaching teaching students directly? As I mentioned, Smith in the argument that Smith made said, yes, I don't agree with that. I don't think that this means that we have to stop teaching students directly. As I mentioned earlier, I see this as a shift in priority, right? So we are putting faculty development much more into the center of our efforts, and we're moving students a little bit out of the center of our efforts. But I don't necessarily think this means we have to stop teaching students directly. And it could be that, that it actually ends up that, our instruction with students is better because those faculty members have been through our programming, because they are more familiar with faculty development. The times that they work with us, it's going to be more meaningful to students because it's going to be more integrated into the course. So I think that we can still continue to do one-shots. We can still continue to be embedded librarians. We continue to teach credit-bearing courses. I don't think that there has to be this strong dichotomy. Either we're only teaching faculty or we're only teaching students. But I think that we do want to have that shift in priority where our work with faculty goes up a lot more, right, than it is now. And if that means that we do have to decrease some of the things that we're doing with students, then, that may be something that we have to critically think about. So yeah, I don't agree with that. There's like a complete and total dichotomy that is needed. And, we still can work in ways to work directly with students as part of this model. So there was a question about incentives. How do we get faculty to participate? Right. I think that we have to think about how we frame our programming. If we do go in and say, we're going to teach you how to teach information literacy, you may get some resistance to that. But if we say that information, like you are having all of these issues, right, with how students are using sources and, how students are citing and how students are doing research, they're not doing it very well, right? And we say, okay, we're going to provide you with some strategies and resources that are going to allow you to teach these concepts and skills better, that faculty are going to be much more interested. We have to provide them with practical strategies and resources that they can use in their classrooms. We have to think about how we can connect information literacy to pedagogical strategies. The ones that we really highlight are decoding the disciplines and transparency and learning and teaching framework. I also talk a lot about small teaching, backwards design. But we have to give them, like, we're helping them become better teachers. We're not helping them to just teach information literacy, right? So that's the way that I think that we have to think about how we frame our programming, right? So that gets to this next question of, do we mention information literacy? As we already talked about, faculty don't really know what information literacy is. But, so, there's some evidence that maybe we're better off if we actually don't even use the word information literacy. I know Bill, who's here, Bill Badke, mentioned last week, right, talking about research or research processes, right? And you can see some of the examples of my workshops, help my students can't research, right? Outdated research notions, language of research. So I use research a lot myself. I also use information literacy though, right? The course that I have is called Teaching Information Literacy, right? So I use a mix of sometimes I talk about information literacy directly, sometimes I talk about research. It kind of just depends on the specific topic that I'm talking about. But I think that goes back to the framing. What is the language that's going to reach your faculty? And if it's talking about research and not really mentioning information literacy, I think that's okay, right? All right, back to the issue of incentives again. So a lot of librarians that have done some type of teach-the-teacher programming have offered incentives. And sometimes that is monetary incentives, ranging from, I've seen like $25 to attend a workshop up to like $1,000 to redesign a course. And obviously we don't have the money to provide incentives to every faculty member. So, if you can provide incentives as you're starting a program, you want to do a faculty learning community or do an institute or something like that, if you can provide some incentives, yes, I think that's going to get greater participation. But it doesn't necessarily have to be monetary incentives. So, is there something that faculty can use to get recognition for their promotion and tenure efforts if they participate in your programming? Can you highlight the chance to publish or present based on what they learned, perhaps with a librarian, as Sherry Sains and her colleagues talked about as one way of getting faculty to participate in this? So as I mentioned, through some of our programming, faculty are able to apply for the teaching endorsement, but we haven't generally found that that's been a driving motivation. And actually for the Meaningful Inquiry workshop, a lot of folks have actually completed the workshop but just actually don't apply for the endorsement. So they've done all of the work and they just don't go to that next step. So, incentives may be needed, they may not. It's going to depend on what you're asking of faculty. An incentive for an hour-long workshop, that's online, I don't think that you're going to need them. For other multi-day things, you may need more incentives. So you'll have to think about what kinds of incentives you can offer. Are we going to reach everyone? Of course not. There's no way, right? We're not going to reach every instructor, but we're not reaching every instructor now, right? So I don't really think that's a major impediment, this idea that we can't reach every instructor, we can't get every instructor involved in this, because we can't get every instructor involved now with the programming that we're offering. And one last thing, I think this might be the last one in this area, like, do you need an additional degree to be able to do this work? Some folks have asked this kind of question. I will admit myself, I do have another master's degree in instructional design. And I do think that that has helped in my ability to do this work, but I don't think it's necessary at all. There is, in fact, no specific degree associated with faculty development or educational development. Most of the folks who work in educational development unit centers for teaching and concerning, they come from a range of different disciplinary backgrounds. Some of them, a good number of them will have education degrees, but they have STEM backgrounds, they have humanities backgrounds, they have arts and sciences backgrounds, right? So there is no one specific degree associated with doing faculty development work or educational development work. If you're able to get an instructional design degree, an educational technology degree, that may be helpful, but I don't think it's necessary at all. I've done some interviews with some librarians that have done faculty development work. Some of them had additional degrees, some did not. And there wasn't really a strong consensus on this idea that an additional degree is needed. If you participate in faculty development training or programming yourself, that's a way that you can get practice in these areas. But a lot of us, we have already the ability and skills to be able to do this work. We have teaching experience. We know how to collaborate with faculty across multiple disciplines. We know what our institutional context looks like. And those are really the skills that are necessary to be faculty developers. Yeah, maybe we need to look into some specific, pedagogical strategies more, but we already have the skills and abilities to be able to do this. And I very strongly believe that. Right. All right. So as we come to the end, I know we've got lots of questions and comments in the chat. So I'm just going to really quickly go through these. If you are interested in starting or expanding a faculty development program, some steps, right? First of all, I think really important is just thinking about the mindset shift. Right. We had a lot of, when the earlier comments, there was a lot of hesitancy, a lot of uncertainty, which I think is very valid. But we have to think about a mindset shift. And one of the participants in the study that I am working on, haven't had a chance to publish it, was talking about this work. And they said, I am still teaching information literacy, right? It is the audience that is changing, not our end goal. Our end goal is to help students graduate with information literacy, right? Help students graduate with these skills and abilities that they need to navigate this complex information environment that we live in. So it's not that we are saying that we don't think students are important, right? Students are still the primary goal, but we're shifting the audience that we use to get to that primary goal. And so I think a mindset shift in how we think about ourselves and our educational role is important. But I don't see this, I mentioned this earlier, right? But I feel so strongly about this. I don't see this as giving up our expertise, as giving up our role. I see this as embracing our expertise. Right. So start by thinking about, what you hope to achieve by faculty development. What kinds of programming is going to work on your campus? Talk to the faculty developers and educational developers on your campus. Some campuses have a strong tradition of offering faculty learning communities. Some do like faculty institutes. Some do what kinds of programming are faculty developers offering on your campus, and think about what's going to work best in your context. What is the kind of program that's going to look like depending on the staff that you have in the library, what your institutional context is like, and think about those kinds of questions. This is how you can share this link, use this link in the slides there, but I just put a link to our goals in there in case anyone wanted to take a look at those as we're going through. I think it's really important to think about how can we incorporate faculty development into the mission of our programs, our instruction programs, or our libraries more broadly, right? The teaching and learning department at Ohio State specifically has instructor development as a key thing that we do in our program, right? And there's some research out there showing that if it's part of the mission, if it's part of the goals, right, librarians are going to be much more willing to participate if they know that they're going to get credit for doing this, right? So we need to provide structure and think about how this work will be recognized as part of the promotion and tenure process, right? But it has to be incorporated into the goals of the library and department as a priority and not just as an occasional thing that we do. Collaborate and connect. Reach out to your faculty development centers and units, right? What kinds of programming they can do? How can they help you? How can you help them, right? What is going on your campus that you can take advantage of? What is the initiative, the hot thing that is going on, and how can you gear your program around that so that you can connect with the faculty needs at that moment. A number of institutions have developed faculty development programs as part of their quality enhancement plan, for example. But if there are like programs like our endorsement program, right, campus redesign programs like at Purdue, how can you get the library involved in those already existing sort of faculty development programs? So starting small, you want to start with just a few workshops just to get started, but then, you want to think about the long term going forward. This is just some quick guidance, if you want to start developing one particular workshop, think about what issue is really going to grab the attention of your faculty members. AI is a really big one. You can talk about AI and information literacy, and that is going to get some faculty into your program, right? But citations, plagiarism, that's always an important one as well. Think about format, right? If you, Zoom, it's going to be much more easy for people across your campus to attend. If you have a face-to-face programming, none of the hour-long workshops that I do are ever face-to-face because I have faculty, from 5 different campuses at Ohio State coming, and I don't expect anyone to come to Columbus for a 1-hour workshop. For our 2.5-day workshop, we do that one in person. So it just kind of depends. I promote multiple times through multiple channels, right? And then I always do a lot of practical guidance as part of my workshops. So I have a link there to, if you want like a program planning guide, if that will help with anyone, I want to share that. Okay, so now we'll try to get to lots and lots of questions. All right, so take a look at some of the questions in the Q&A and continue to add those questions in as we're going through forward. Let's see. Okay, how might the pervasiveness of moves toward contingent and precarious positions for faculty impact innovation in this model and in a more general sense? So that's a really great question, John. And that's something that we definitely have to think about. Is that we're having less and less full-time faculty, and so that's one of the things that thinking about, what kind of programs that you offer that are going to be available to that faculty, right? Those folks that are in those contingent faculty roles. Are they going to be able to or even eligible to attend like a multi-day workshop where they get an incentive? They may not. So you may have to think about different types of shorter focused programming that would be more available to that particular audience. But that is a really, I think, important and key question. Let's see. Right, so how do librarians address the risks to the library as a unit in the institution, which is often competing for resources, particularly when the drivers for this model adoption are early or mid-career librarians rather than executive suite leadership? So that's a really interesting point. One, I'm not quite sure I would say that early career librarians are tending to be the drivers for this model. I would say it tends to be more mid or later career librarians that are the drivers for this model, not necessarily executive level. But I think that a lot of early career librarians are socialized into the one-shot model primarily, and it sometimes takes a little bit of time to move over into thinking about potentially alternatives. But the risks to the library as a unit, I think, is an important thing to think about in terms of, providing instruction is the way that we show our value, right? And, again, as we said, we don't have to stop instruction directly to students, but we can show our value by saying, hey, we've done all of these workshops for faculty and we had all of these participants and we engaged in this program that the Faculty Development Center was doing, right? And we developed and led this other faculty learning community. So I see this as a way to sort of raise the visibility of the impact that the library is having. So I'll mention so one of the things, since I've started doing all of this programming and working with our Faculty Development Center, I get invited to give programs for the Faculty Development Center on topics that are not library related at all. I've led several book groups on just pedagogy related topics, right? I've led workshops on prior knowledge, and they're not library topics at all. So I've become more recognized on campus as having an expertise in pedagogy for all of this work that I am doing. And I'm able to contribute to the Faculty Development Center beyond talking about library resources. So I see and think about this as a way to increase the visibility of the library and how we contribute to the educational mission of the institution. So in the chat, a question came in: to what extent would leadership need to support this? Yes, so it's absolutely crucial that the leadership in the library and the department and the instruction department supports this model, right? Faculty or librarians who want to do faculty development work have to know that it's going to be recognized, right, as part of their promotion and tenure efforts. And that's why I really emphasize, I think it's important that it's part of the mission of the library, right? And yeah, this idea of starting with champion faculty members and building from there. Any faculty member, at Ohio State, or any instructor, can attend the programming. There are some that have attended more than once, and that we've had like we did like assessment, like in the sessions where we had members come back that had participated in our previous programming and show how they had implemented that programming. But yeah, so I think that it is absolutely crucial that the library leadership is on board with this model for sure. So question: how does having faculty teach IL impact the workload for reference work? That's a really good question. I don't have any specific data that I can provide, and I'm not aware of any specific data that I can provide on how that might impact directly the reference department. At Ohio State, we're a little weird in that we don't really have a specific reference department. Reference work is primarily done by students, but I actually haven't done any work to see if there's been any way that we could tell if there's been an increase in reference from this. So I know that we're coming to the end of the question. So yeah, Natalie had asked in the chat, have you partnered with your Center for Teaching and Learning? So as I mentioned, yes, I collaborate, a lot with our Center for Teaching and Learning. They have a program where faculty and staff from across campus can become an affiliate of our Center for Teaching and Learning. And so I'm a senior affiliate with the Center for Teaching and Learning. And so that's why I've been, tapped in to do some of that programming that's not library related, faculty development programming as well. So yes, collaboration with a Center for Teaching and Learning, if you have those on campus, is key. So I know that we are at the end of our time. Just wanted to mention we have one other upcoming presentation in this series. I'll send everyone a follow-up email with that information. A few of us are also starting a book group on small teaching. If you're interested in being a facilitator or participant in that book group, I'll send additional follow-up information on that as well. References, resources, all of those are there. I don't know how we ended up on the framework slide, that hit something and it came there. But anyway, so thank you all. Thank you all so much for being here. I am happy to stick around for a while and answer some additional questions. But I really appreciate you all being here. Again, if you have other questions that you would like to ask, please send me an email. I love to talk about this. You might have gotten that I'm kind of enthusiastic about this model. So I love to talk about this. I'll share all of the resources and everything with everyone. I'm gonna stop recording, but again, I will definitely stick around for additional questions or comments that folks would like to have. So if you do have a question now and you wanted to go ahead and put it in the chat, that way I'll know it's a new question rather than one that either that person has left or, right. So if you have any additional questions, go ahead and put those in the chat and I'm happy to stick around and answer those. Thank you, William. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Madeline. And yeah, you can also, if you would like to raise your hand, we can also do that at this point. Make sure that it did stop recording. All right. Okay. I think. All right, John, I think you should now be able to talk.
Hi, great. Yeah, thank you for the presentation, and I've seen a couple of these webinars, and building a lot of really great and radical ideas. I definitely think is the right word for it. I asked the question about the risks,
Yes.
and when I had asked about when it is early or mid-career. I was actually talking just about the particular circumstances when you are an early career or pretty early on, even if you consider yourself a mid-career, or maybe just someone who is newly entering into an institution that you think could use this model. What are the ways that you communicate? Because that seems to be like a big reason for the hesitancy, is seeing a lot of risks to the program or risks to the unit. How do you communicate to library leadership or other librarians in that unit, to help understand where those risks are and how you might manage those risks?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think you're absolutely right that there's an article I read recently, and it was Annie Foe and colleagues, I can't remember, it was from that college and research libraries, especially showing the one shot, where they talk about how librarians are socialized kind of into the one shot model. And anytime you kind of, if you're a new career librarian coming in and you kind of raise your hand and you're like, maybe we should be doing something different, that sometimes that doesn't go over very well. So that's totally true. So, I think that, a couple of different things that potentially librarians that are interested in kind of pushing forward this model a little bit. There is some research out there. It's not a ton, but there is, lots of examples of libraries that have done faculty development programming. I wrote an article, and it was like 2020, that covered a lot of different examples of these kinds of programming, and there's been more since then. So you could perhaps kind of start small, sharing some of these examples. Hey, here's a library that did this faculty learning community. Here's a library that did this great workshop series. So I think, yeah, coming in and saying, yes, we need to change right away everything that we've been doing is probably not always going to go over very well. But so I do kind of that starting small. Can we start to take a few steps to changing our programming? But yeah, I don't have any expectation that it's going to be like a radical change right away. As you said, that every library is just going to be able to shift to this right away. It is going to take time, and it's going to take changing thinkings and mindsets. That's just going to happen with more proof as more and more libraries do this. So I don't know if that helped or not, but
No, that was helpful. Thank you.
thank you. All right. So I think Martha, if you're still here, you should be able to.
Okay, yep. Why can't I unmute my?
I can hear you.
I know. I just can't unmute my my camera, but that's okay.
Oh, okay. No, yeah.
So I have been working on my campus with our academic assessment committee, and I've been trying to push through the information literacy assessment, the student learning outcomes for that, using the AAC&U value rubric, but it is really outdated. And so it really needs to be updated and revised to also include AI. But I was just wondering if you have used any kind of assessment process to help support this, pushing your promoting your program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's a great question. So I will say that in terms of like the model that we push forward in terms of what information literacy looks like is based on the framework for information literacy. So we don't normally we share in some of the programs that we do, we share like the ACU rubric, but we don't use that primarily as the way that we kind of frame information literacy. But yeah, in terms of like being able to, as I mentioned during the assessment, has not been structurally implemented yet.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. So that's a part of the process that we are still working on. One of the things that's really challenging about the Ohio State libraries is that we are incredibly decentralized. So we do not have like an instruction coordinator. We don't have a position like that. We don't really have like an instruction department. Like I'm part of the teaching and learning department, and we do some instruction, but like subject librarians do instruction completely on their own. And so, yeah, in terms of like this sort of like, yeah, structural process that we've put in place to do that kind of work, we're not there yet.
So when you said that, in regards to that, when you said that you didn't have a reference department, that you have student workers doing the reference. So reference is not considered instruction at all? Is that what you're like? They're not,
Yeah.
that's not assessed at all for learning for IL?
No, not really. No.
Okay.
So not other than a few librarians that are actually part of the teaching and learning department, I actually don't think any of our librarians do reference work anymore in that way. Like we don't have librarians at a reference desk or anything like that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else that has any questions? You can raise your hand if you would like, or you can put a question in the chat if you prefer to do that rather than raising your hand. All right. So looks like I guess we're coming to the end. So for those that have stuck around to the end, thank you so much for being here. And again, if you would like to follow up with me at all, please feel free to send me an email. Happy to talk more about this. But I hope everyone has a wonderful day.